Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. On this video, we're going to talk about something I absolutely love talking about with performers, which is our strengths. Oftentimes when it comes to performance, we can very easily look at the things we don't have in a performance context. So I wish I was stronger. I wish I could communicate better. I wish I could do this. And we don't necessarily focus on the things we are good at, which can actually be our real beacon of confidence when it comes to a different performance context. However, in today, what I want to talk a little bit about is how do we know where the sweet spot of a strength is? So one of the things I love talking about is our strengths and our weaknesses. And oftentimes we think they are two completely separate entities. The real reality is, oftentimes our strengths and our weaknesses are a lot closer aligned than that. Sometimes our biggest weaknesses can sometimes be because we've overplayed our strengths. So let that sink in for a second. We've overplayed our strengths. So what I almost mean by that is, have you ever had it in a situation where one of your big strengths is maybe your aggression or maybe your intensity, but that intensity in one situation where it required you to be really tactical meant that you didn't see that and you rushed in. So it's about understanding, well, this is a real strength of mine, but in what contexts do those strengths really where are they maximized? Where do those strengths actually play effectively for my performance? And what context do they potentially trip me up? So a really good activity that is worth doing for any performer, I'm not just talking about athletes, but any performer in any environment, is to almost map your strength out. What is my strength and what does it look like? Okay, and what you can start to do is go, well, how do I know when I'm playing to that strength? So an analogy I love making is, if, say for example, I had a 15-second clip, okay, whether that's an Instagram reel or YouTube short, that style video. Imagine I had that video on you when you were performing to that strength at its best. What would I see? What would the behaviors look like? What would the impact of that strength be? And that'll allow you to start to think about, okay, well, what context does it where that strength really stands out? Okay, when it's really brilliant. And then you can also then start to go, well, actually, let's use that same analogy. What about when it's overplayed? So when I've overdone it, and that's starting to become problematic. And you can start to see what is going on in the environment there. And you're developing your awareness that maybe you start to see, right, this context requires this from me. Maybe I need to be mindful that if I overplay this strength, it could be problematic. Is there a different way I could tackle it? So you can almost develop that battery of approaches, okay, that effectively a tool belt of going, well, actually, I know I can play to this, but if this context changes, I can shift into this process. Okay. Now, with your strengths, what we can look at is there's three main, zones that we want to think about. Is there some situations where we're not playing to our strength enough? So it's almost underdone. Okay. Is it almost, actually, I haven't used it in that context. Here's how I could use it. So that's the underdone part. You have the sweet spot. Now, the key thing about a strength that's worth considering is it's not as clear cut. If you imagine it like a bell curve, it's not that you've got this big landing space where your strength is completely in that sweet spot. It's often like the tip of a mountain. There's a very small area where you get it and it lands perfectly. But as soon as you go over the other side, you can almost snowball where you're overplaying it. And that's where it can lead to that overplay, that overcooked space. So if you break those three zones down between what's it like when it's underdone, what's it like in its sweet spot, and what's it like when it's overplayed. And a real thing, if you want to take it a bit deeper and look into it, is what's my thought process like when it's underdone, sweet spot, and overplayed? What's my emotional response? How am I feeling? Is there certain emotions that mean I tie into that strength better, or when I potentially overplay it? So for example, I could be confident when it's in the sweet spot, but I might be getting cocky. Or might be a feeling of arrogance that, I've got this in the bag, which means I overplay it. And start to break that down. So how we think, how we feel, and then a really big one, and this is where the click is a really nice example. What are my behaviors? What do I tend to do between those three that I'm able to identify? Right, that's me playing in either of those three zones. Because then if you're ever nervous or starting to think, right, in a certain environment, this context works perfectly, how can I play to my strength? Start with the behaviors. Okay, so if we're feeling a bit nervous and apprehensive, let's start with the right actions. The behaviors can help build that trust and that confidence, both in terms of how we feel and how we think. Start with the behaviors is a really, really nice one. This will allow you to start to see and experiment with the different ways that it can play out. Okay. Now, this could be also across corporate. So, for example, me as a psychologist, one of my big strengths, me talking personally, is I'm quite approachable and I love helping people. Now, that's fantastic. That's great for the role that I play. However, where it can be quite problematic and where it can be quite challenging is what happens if everyone asks me for help. That natural strength is, yeah, well, great. My belief is that if someone's asked for help, it's taken a real courage and honesty to do so, and I want to be able to support that. However, that overplay of strength is if I say yes to too many people, suddenly I've spread myself too thin, and therefore I'm not able to help everyone as effectively as I'd like to. And I guess from my side, I'm then burning out because I'm working every hour God sends. So again, that one strength in some contexts is brilliant. If there's context where I'm getting lots of it, it can blindside me, and that can be a blind spot. So this is how you can start to identify and map out and utilize this strength framework we're talking about, so you can really maximize and ensure you're staying as close as possible, as consistently as possible within that sweet spot. And you're able to spot those signs that you're potentially underdoing it, or more importantly, overplaying it. Okay? And it's more likely that when you start playing to your strengths more, that overplay can happen. Okay, so we want to really, really be prepared for that. Hopefully you found that video useful. And if you want to follow along, I'm going to be sharing more tips, more discussions on these types of topics. If you also want to follow me on my Instagram and LinkedIn, that's where I share lots of like carousels, quick tips. I'll be sharing those more on the YouTube shorts as well. But do follow along, and I'll see you on the next one.